All right, thanks, Diana. So very excited for this session, and I'm gonna start sharing my screen and just to introduce our speakers for tonight's presentation, and then later on I will hand it over to them. So just give me a second. If you can please let me know if you can see my screen.
There we go.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, we are bringing this to the community from the Canada chapter. This was initially an idea that Carlos and I had, a discussion that we had during the summit, the MVP summit. But this week we also got Raul engaged on this event, which is awesome. We always encourage MVPs and everybody from the community to get together and do this kind of sessions. But anyway, we're coming from the Canada chapter, but who is actually going to drive this session is Carlos and Raul. So thank you very much for both of them. A little bit of introductions on the agenda, actually. I'm going to really quick go about us, introduce our speakers, and then I will hand it over to them. In the end, we are going to have Q&A session, but at any time, if you have questions, just you can type on our chat. I'm going to be watching the, the chat, so I can ask Carlos and Raul, but if you also want to speak out, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions directly to them. So a little bit about us. Again, Canada chapter. We try to do as much as possible this kind of online events. This is the fourth one that we are hosting so far this year, but we are always doing co-host events as well. So if you are not a member, go to our chapter page, register yourself as a member. You are going to get the communications and the updates and everything else that we do on your email. Cool. For tonight's session, we have Diana. She already introduced herself. She's our community leader, marketing manager. She's awesome. She does a great job helping us to put these events together. Myself, I am one of the chapter leaders here, 2 times MVP, Canada chapter leader as well. We have Carlos, which is my fellow friend from back home, Brazil. We met in June on the summit, but we knew each other for some time already. And we have also our friend Raul, sorry, Raul Goyal. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name. You can correct me if you want. He's a senior director, ERP systems. I forgot the company you work for, but anyway, Raul is also an MVP colleague. So now I will actually stop showing my screen, hand it over the floor to both of them, and I will just be interjecting here and there. But yeah, Carlos, Raul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And thank you, Diana. And thanks everyone for joining the call today with us. Really excited to talk about Test Suite. It's a technology that I'm really love. And let me share my screen here. Let me make sure I share the correct screen. Okay. Hopefully I'm doing this correct. Let me know if you all can see my screen. It says you can. Okay, cool. Good deal.
Yes.
So what we'd like to do today is really go really quick to some slides directly from UiPath websites, the official slides that they use. So me, Raul, and Joel, we don't work for UiPath. We're just passionate about the technology, right? So there is really no commercial or anything. You just be kind of go through, hey, here's how the technology works. Here's how we see it being successful, and hopefully you find the same success on your implementation. So go real quick, maybe 5 minutes with a couple of slides, so we avoid the death by PowerPoint. And then let's jump into the platform. I want to walk you just through a couple of the cool features that Test Suite offers to us, and I'll hand over to Raul to kind of bring a little bit of some of the real world experience on how he's being successful implementing Test Suite to drive his QA practice and elevate the tests on his experience, and then hopefully we have a couple questions and we make it interactive as well. So if at any time you have questions, please use the chat. I'll probably, as I'm presenting, I'll not be monitoring the chat, but I'll catch up. And if Joel, if you see anything that needs to stop, please just bring it up. That way we can keep things in context. So without further ado, Test Suite is about automating really the QA area, right? Go from the manual efforts that goes around testing new applications, new versions, new releases, to really do that in a way that is continuous, right? Because if you automate, it doesn't take much effort to run the tests, and then you guarantee the quality on every single release. And it almost blends a little bit also with monitoring, right? Because continuous testing means you are simulating what your customers are doing on your applications in really a real life scenario, and that kind of doubles a little bit as monitoring. A little bit different than traditional monitoring that's more intensive, but definitely continuous testing is really the future of testing. So let's take a look how what is really the challenge, right? The more you have to test, usually the more people you have to hire to do those tests. And I think there is a lot of researches that kind of show how that goes. To really staff people to test more applications gets really costly. So the solution is a group of products that you can leverage in integrated way to help you do your testing, right? And in UiPath terms, that means really 4 different products that work together. Test Manager is the heart of it, and is really how you manage those tests and manage requirements, manage the test data and whatnot. Then you have Studio, which is where you build those tests, right? Where we code. So it's the Studio that we already love for the traditional RPA environments, exactly the same tool that you already know. You just looking at it from a testing perspective. Then Orchestrator, exactly the same orchestrator we already love. We will just use that to kind of distribute those tests against several robots, so you can run that in parallel, right? And finally, a specialized type of robot. So you probably use to see, if you're coming from the RPA world, attended and unattended robots. Now for testing, you have a different robot called Test Robot, right? That is a robot that is really very similar to the unattended robot, but with a different type of licensing that makes it a little more accessible for testing, which is very good, right? So that combination of tools is what brings the name of Test Suite. Is really that combination. It allows you to do web application testing, mobile application testing, API application testing, and anything else, RPA testing, database testing, and so forth. I'm going to go through some of those just to show the features on how you can get there on your testing journey. Let's go through some features here that might caught your attention before you jump on the platform. Well, one of the biggest challenges testers and QA teams usually have is, hey, someone says I need to test this feature on my application. I don't know, maybe you have a e-commerce website and you need to test if the folks are able to add products to the cart and make a purchase. Well, you need to mock test data, maybe from different states, different countries, choosing different options and whatnot. So creating test data is sometimes very challenging. With UiPath, not anymore, right? You can use AI to basically describe what you need, and boom, it generates that test data for you. So when you run your tests, you can run several variations of that test with different test data to make sure that you have positive scenarios, negative scenarios, right? So let's say you have a product that is out of stock. You want to test that it can't be sold, right? But you also want to test a product that is in stock, and you want to be able to add it to the cart and complete that purchase. So it kind of allows you to write the test once with all the scenarios you want to go, but have different test quality and test data to validate your application, which is really exciting. You don't have to worry about that anymore. AI and UiPath can bring that to you. Another really, really, really cool thing that UiPath Test Suite does is what's called giving you the test coverage. And test coverage is, imagine you have a web application. Again, let's go back to that example, my e-commerce. And you might have, I don't know, a form where you you may be a new customer and you fill in that form, right? And that form maybe have 10 fields, name, address, whatever, and then has 2 buttons, save and cancel. Well, UiPath evaluates that screen and basically knows that you have to test each one of those 10 fields and those 2 buttons. As you build your code to do the test, it tells you how close you are on having 100% of coverage on that screen. How cool is that, right? You can now have a very visual and easy way to say, hey, I'm testing everything that each screen of my application offers to my customers. And it also, of course, matches that then against the test results, and you then see, okay, I'm testing about 85% of my application in this example, and those tests, 9% of those are passing. Very, very nice feature as well. Now, Raul will probably share some of your experience on the ERP side, but if you are SAP shop, which most companies use some type of ERP, SAP very popular, now you have a way to say, hey, where should I start testing? So imagine if you're starting your journey today and you have SAP as a huge ERP, right? Several features used across the company, different areas. Where do I start? So this is the answer to that question. You start by looking at the heat map that basically shows if the color code and the different sizes, which feature of SAP is the most used. So you start by testing those ones that are used across the globe, right? That are used for the whole company. And then you go to the next one, to the next one. So you have very high impact from day one. The first test that you are choosing to implement is the one that will give you the most benefit because it's the one that's the most usage. So the heat map connects to a SAP live, ingests that data, and basically tells you, hey, these functions are the most used functions on your SAP instance. Therefore, you should probably test those. And then as you write those tests, they turn green. And then you see that heat map differently. So you have the sizes kind of telling you what is very used for more users, called more times, and then they start getting the callers to tell you the ones that you have already completed. So end of your testing journey, it never ends, right? But as you go through your testing journey, again, you have a very nice way to prioritize the tests that are required in your ERP. Very, very useful.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Finish your sentence.
No, please.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think this is where I would say for us as a customer. So we are UiPath customer for I think almost 4 years now, and we just started last year into Test Suite, Test Manager, and heat map is one thing which changed the whole thing from our perspective. Like Carlos said, this is where prior to heat map we were very decentralized. Testing strategy, test plan, test cases, every business unit in SAP, like we're SAP customer, like SAP runs our entire internal financials and every transactions we run on SAP, and which is on-prem. And as you can imagine, being an on-prem ERP customer, we do a lot of upgrades, a lot of patching, a lot of system work on a periodic basis. And then every time we expected business and the technical folks to go through series of test cases, and those test cases are all decentralized, sitting on some location. But then with the heat map, it brought everything together. Like now we have everything managed through heat map. We can see the status as to where the test cases are, who is progressing, who is not progressing, which test cases, if they're running unattended, if they're failing, why they're failing, because the status of those test cases will tell you through each heat map as to where the things are broken. I think this is where I think the core the heart of the whole test manager is to bring everything together and give you one dashboard to manage, execute, and monitor the entire test cases. So just wanted to add to that. I think that we are heavily using at this point in our company whenever we are ready to do any type of test cases.
Thanks, Rowan. You mentioned that your SAP environment is on-prem, your SAP shop as well, and you're on Hex, we're on the cloud. So now you see it's extremely valuable when you have it on-prem and you're updating. Now in the cloud is extremely invaluable because you don't know which changes the cloud provider is doing for you,
Right.
right? That's the thing about clouds. Beautiful. Someone else has to worry about infrastructure, but guess what? You don't know how they're taking care of that infrastructure as well. So it's so versatile, it's so dynamic that this is really a nice feature. And I think this will grow, right? SAP is the first app, but you know all the bedrock applications out there. Think Salesforce, think Oracle ERP and whatnot. There's definitely more to come on this side, but the SAP one is amazing. If you're on the SAP,
and the good thing is you can customize this heat map. As the UiPath provides a standard template where we can adapt to, but then you can easily customize this heat map based on your own processes, based on the type of a business process or the test case you want to run through. This test manager, you can easily, it's a CSV file, you can change how do you want to show the heat map to highlight what's more relevant to your business processes. It's so easy to customize, and you can create, you can adjust it over time. It's not that it's one time, like as things progressing on your side, you can always redefine the definition of the heat map as to what makes more sense for your business. And accordingly, you can customize and redesign the definition of the heat map.
Carlos and Ro, can I ask a question? Is this heat map only for SAP applications, or is this available for any kind of application?
Right now is only SAP, but I think that's what I was mentioning about the Salesforce and Oracle. I think more to come. But right now, SAP, and actually, if SAP Shop and SAP Sapphire was recently the big presentation and whatnot, this was a huge success because it's really a huge differentiator on the SAP world on testing. So, but right now is SAP.
One thing which you can do, Joel, and we're doing it is also like we define more as a process test case. If it is, we're calling it like order to cash, and some portion of that process comes from Salesforce and some portion happens on the SAP side. But when I define my test case, I'm defining it more like an end-to-end order to cash process where the test case might be connecting to Salesforce behind the scene to initiate the process there and take it down to SAP. But in the heat map, I'm just calling it more like an order to cash process, and then accordingly connecting it to the various test cases which are executing on the SAP side. But we are able to then define one of your test case that literally go to Salesforce and then connect to Salesforce, initiate the opportunities, initiate the agreements, push it down to SAP, then process on the SAP side. So you can redefine your test case accordingly. But out of box, it comes with more like an SAP kind of a heat map, but then you can at least relabel your test cases to make it more meaningful how your processes are running, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you. So just to burn through the slides here, of course, we start this presentation talk about continuous testing. Continuous testing means integrated to your CI/CD pipelines, right? So every time you make a change to your application, you want to trigger the tests. So very, very tightly coupled to CI/CD pipelines. There are actions for GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, and whatnot that you can integrate. So you can trigger the applications around changes in code for the applications where you're having development done in-house, things like that. The same workflow analyzer that you love for RPA is ensuring the quality of the code that's being done. So you're in Studio, right? So you have all the features from Studio, including the workflow analyzer as well. So you can review the code from a automation in that way. What do you get out of that, right? So you get way more test coverage, you get faster testing, you get more things being developed, and you have I don't know, again, 96% reduction in automation downtime and whatnot. So a lot of benefits that comes from choosing a automation strategy for your QA area. And you might be coming from a slightly different scenario, right? So maybe you already have an AOM managing your tests. So maybe you have HPAOM, right? Or maybe you have TestRail Maybe you have something else, right? X-ray or other test management tools that are really focused on just testing managing the requirements and pass or fail. Totally fine. You just connect that to UiPath Test Suite, and you bring the tests from those AOM tools, and then you create automations, right? So you can directly leverage any history that you have from any test management tools that you already own. There are first APIs and native connectors from pretty much every big player on the market for testing as well. Very cool integrations with things like Jira and Azure DevOps as well, right? So if you have a strong agile development practice and you want to say, hey, this user story was completed for development, ready for test, boom, the developer is on Jira or Azure DevOps, you might say, hey, send it over for the QA team. QA team receives that, works in UiPath, sends that back, just say, hey, it passed, it updates the Jira card, the Azure DevOps card, say, hey, test passed, here are all the logs. If it failed, here are the print screens on the screen that it failed, so the developer can go and fix its code, right? So extremely powerful integrations on the testing lifecycle with project management tools, AOM management tools, so that you can be successful. This is the slide. So you can see pretty much every big player of testing and project management, like GitHubs, GitLab, Jira, GitHub, Git, generic Git, Azure DevOps, anything, right? It can be integrated. And if you don't see something here that you're using, guess what? There are APIs. You can easily build that integration with integration services if you want to live on the UiPath world, right? So that's it. That's a white paper from UiPath. Let's take a look on the tool itself real quick and kind of go a little bit with some of those cool features. And let me pause. I see a hand raised. Hey, Hardik.
So, Carlos, one quick question. So, we are able to perform testing on the Salesforce as well, right? Because if you go on your documentation, it was not mentioned anywhere in the Salesforce, I think.
Yeah, you can test anything, any application, right?
Okay.
So if you're using UiPath Studio to build an automation in Salesforce, you can create a test. Absolutely. Actually, one of the examples I'll do is slightly related to Salesforce, but no, we test Salesforce with UiPath. Any application, any mobile application as well. Maybe you want to test fleet, the fleet management solution from Salesforce on an iOS and an Android. Maybe you want to just use the web thing on Salesforce. You can definitely test anything, any web application, any desktop application, any mobile application, any database, any API.
And that's
I
what I
think
was
it covers pretty much everything.
That's one of our use cases we're doing. So in my company, we're using Salesforce to SAP. So one of our test cases is to pick up the opportunities which are created and processed in Salesforce to make sure that the data in the opportunity in Salesforce is matching to the data processed on the SAP side from a billing and a rev rec standpoint. So that's exactly what we're doing. Like the test bot will go and grab an opportunity from Salesforce, look at some of the data there, look up the sales order on the SAP side, and then validate it. So yeah, so to Carlos' point, the heat map is more like, yes, the out of box come in with the standard SAP templates, but that doesn't restrict you to define your test cases for any application. You can still define your test cases to do any type of a testing for any application, and then you can accordingly connect those test cases to a heat map also.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your question. So I'm going to go down this here just to show some of the features and then jump into a little bit more. So the initial dashboard just tells you, hey, what is the coverage that you have and how much is automated. And I haven't run this stuff. This is a pilot project just for show. And it will have the values on the testing. Here's the heat map that we discussed a little bit earlier, right? You can kind of see examples, and these I just got a sample CSV again. Don't want to show any company data here, but it kind of shows you, hey, in percentage, 7% of the usage on this sample SAP environment comes from changing a purchase order, right? So the transaction in E22N. So that's probably a good candidate to be starting on the tests. because everything else is 5%, 4%, 5%, and a couple others that are really low, some custom code, some Z functions and whatnot. So it really helps on that prioritization that we discussed a little bit earlier. And then as the tests are testing or executed, the color starts changing, and you get that feedback on how successful your SAP testing is being done. I know we talked a lot about that, so I'm kind of moving on. And then you have really the test management lifecycle piece, right? So you can create a requirement here. So I'll just use a silly example. Again, validate that the Salesforce Outlook plugin is working, something like that. So you get a requirement right on the environment, say, hey, I want to have a test cases to validate that functionality, right? And the reason I'm using that example, very, very silly, is because I was working some time ago on creating a quick document for my users to connect Salesforce to Outlook, right? So I wrote this simple document that has a step-by-step on how to install the plugin in Outlook and then sync their the emails from their customers from the inbox directly to a record in Salesforce. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get that documentation that I created for my users, that PDF, right? And I'm going to attach it here. You know, this is the requirements that I have. Let me real quick put it here. Outlook plugin. This is the Outlook plugin. So all it knows about my test case is the description, which is very poor, if you ask me, but I want to give that bad example, and a document, a PDF that has those steps, right? And I can say, hey, why don't you go and generate some tests for me based on what you know? It allows me to add some more files here. So maybe I have other files that describe this process, right? Maybe I have a manual for an application that I'm building that I want to test. I'm going to keep this and say, okay, yeah, use the Outlook one. I can then kind of use some predefined prompts that come from UiPath, and there is a way to manage those prompts and create new prompts. Or I can actually come here and tell what I wanted to adjust. So I'm gonna say validate that Outlook has a Salesforce plugin enabled and it's working. Something, again, very bad prompt, but just to use an example. And then I click generate tests. Now, this takes about 2 minutes. Usually it's ingesting that PDF, is parsing that PDF, is using the AI models that you already use and love on your RPA, but now apply to tests. And while we wait, it's gonna give you an alert here when it's done. So you don't have to stay into that specific screen. You can go work and whatnot, but it should come back and tell me, hey, I'm done. I have some suggestions on some test cases that you can use. So I have some that I done some time ago and I was doing here, and I'll just open one of those before we go back. It basically say, hey, the first step is to use the Salesforce plugin Outlook, right? If it's not installed, nothing else is gonna work. Again, that came from that example. Okay, it's done, so I'll be able to show it. Boom. So you look at the document, you looked at my full description, and it came out with nice. It came out with 10 tests by default, right? So I'm gonna select a couple just to. Okay, there you go. I'm gonna select 3 tests that I liked. I could regenerate, and it would allow me to ask things again to add text. Maybe this wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and I want to change my prompt. If I click regenerate, it's gonna ask me again the prompt, and I can change it. I'm happy with this for now. I'm gonna do 3 tests. right? So again, they are moved to the test cases. So I have 3 new test cases from the selection that I done. That if I just open one of these, is the final, hey, you need to check an email to see if you can log that as a record, because that was the use case that I have defined on that requirement. So end of the day, it started giving me suggestions on test cases that I wanna do. Now, although UiPath is focused on automation, if I want to do manual steps, I can. And look how beautiful. It told me the test. It told me the steps. Let me just get a different one here. It told me what are the steps that need to be tested.
Carlos,
Imagine I'm a developer. I can go back there and just do those steps. Sorry, Joel.
no, yeah, I just want to understand because, man, everything that you are showing here is very impressive. But is this ready to run when you get out of the oven? Let's say put that way. Like when the way it is right now, if I want just to run, can I do that, or do I have any manual coding or configuration that I have to do before running?
We do. So this is all manual for now, right? So we've seen all the manual steps. So this is, let's say I have someone doing the testing traditionally, and it just tells them what they need to do to validate that scenario. Now we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Hold that thought. We're gonna get on some of that automation. Now, to be honest, the code generation is it'll get you a lot of the boilerplate pieces of code. You still have to add your magic, right? You still have to do the development in the stage that we are right now. Now it's getting better and better and better, up to the point that I think we've seen that a little bit on the summit, right? A little bit of the early tests that we had with agentic things is like, if you have a good description, the system will just figure everything out. What we have right now is really a little bit more getting you much faster to the results, but you still have to code.
I think that's how we started a traditional way of doing it, where we define the manual steps, and then you go to Studio to define your code, and then you connect it together. And I think, but it's getting better now, where it gives you some code. It ought to generate some code for you, but I think I'm sure Carlos is going to pull up that also soon to show that. But the traditional way of doing it still works, Joel, where you can define your manual steps, you can define your test cases, you can launch your studio, write your code there, connect it together, and then execute it manually. Like, you can always take that approach.
Yeah, so I'm going to do something very silly here that wasn't planned. But what you do have in Studio Web is I can put a prompt and it will get me the code for Studio Web, right? So you can see that example is actually a Salesforce Slack example, which is really cool. I can say when an email is received in Outlook on a folder called customer, create a lead in Salesforce, something silly like this. And basically what's doing now with Autopilot is looking for what it knows about the tools that I'm looking here, and which activities are available from those activities to the actions. And it's then giving me triggers and whatnot. It has an automatic trigger, so this would be constantly monitoring Outlook. And I can say, okay, this kind of makes sense. Let me continue, and it will bring me to Studio Web. So I can customize that a little bit more to fit my needs. This is not how usually you go on the. I mean, you can start tests like that, but usually you then import that in Studio and add the test piece. But this is just to show you a little bit on a couple examples, right? On how you can do it. Of course, you have to connect to Salesforce. If you need to extract information, it default to DU. You could, of course, just use email activities here, but it's getting there. I think that was just to bring it up. That's getting there. On the test cases, how we usually handle that, and maybe I'm gonna jump to Studio just to show it a little bit. This example, which is I can do something like, hey, I'm using coded automation, so see that it changed a little bit, right? And because I have my this project kind of done with linked with my project. Let me see if it's gonna allow me to play here a little bit. It's gonna say, hey, you created some new test on Test Manager, right? So it's linked to this code. It will create me a test C# file that again has kind of a boilerplate code. And then I can say, hey, let's generate some code, and very similar to what I did before, right? So I don't know, let's say validate, create a lead in Salesforce when an email is received. To be honest, this type of prompt will get me something very generic with good boilerplate code that then you can enhance. There you go. Actually, wasn't that terrible, but it can kind of give you some suggestions of what the code should look like in coded automations linked to Test Manager to kind of get that going. And next is coming the traditional kind of more traditional studio automations with the drag and drop. I think we've seen a little demo of that on the summit, but I think what's having in GA right now is really focused on coded automations for now, which is again already really cool. Of course, I don't have an object library here. If you have an object library here, you can then also drag and drop stuff to the code and reference stuff from the code as well. Kind of helps you a little bit get the development going. But anyways, we got to the point where we have some test cases, right? And then in terminology from UiPath, a test set is a group of test cases. So you might think, if you from the QA area, sometimes you have smoke test, regression test, A/B test into different environments and things like that. This is where you group those test cases into a test set to execute, right? So you can say, hey, I'm ready to continuously run a regression test every night for my application. Might take hours, but you want to have that through the night. And here is where you investigate those test results. Again, I don't have anything running now, but you'll be able to see pass, didn't pass. If you didn't pass, you get to the logs and the print screen of the screen that failed, so you can investigate. And from here, you could again tie that back to Jira to give that information to the developers. Another thing I wanted to show is I mentioned that you can do mobile testing as well, and I just wanted to show you really quickly on how that looks like. Let me see if I can just open an iOS here. So this is UiPath. Let's say you test using Salesforce, and we have the use case. We use the Salesforce for fleet management, and you want to test something there, right? I want to test that maybe in the iOS 16, 15, 14 for some reason, two different versions. You write the test case once, and you can then run it into different versions of devices and whatnot. Now, I could click around here and I don't know, do something silly. I'm gonna be honest, this is not fast. It basically is using computer vision and passing it back and forth to the provider. I'm using also a cloud provider to give me that device. This is a real device that's running on someone else's cloud. So that performance that you're seeing here is far from optimal. You could just run a device locally, right, with an emulator locally. I'm using a remote emulator so that I can have access to iPhones, Androids, and different providers and whatnot. But what I wanted to show here real quick is I'm clicking around and doing something. So let's say I have a mobile application that I want to test, right? When I go back to my workflow, I can say, hey, import those recorded actions. Now, of course, I didn't do much, but you can see that it imported my tap on there, and then I can start customizing the properties and whatnot. To build my it needs to be surrounded by mobile device connection. But anyways, you can see here the connection pointing to that iOS that I've done and collected I recorded what I did on that mobile device, and then I can test my application. Put that into a format of test. So when you create a test case in UiPath, I think I have a better example here. Is this one? No, let me real quick say test case. Just add a new example. So here you go. When you usually create a test case, UiPath uses a BDD approach. So given the environment is prepared, when you do something, you expect something, right? So the testing activities in Studio are really not that many. You see that you have validation. So hey, when this happens, verify that this expression matches. So let's say if I created a case in Salesforce and I look for the case in SAP that I want to match, are them the same? If they are the same, I'm just add this here. You write that expression in here, and again, writing expressions can be very easy with the builders and whatnot. If it passes that, then you say, hey, my test case has passed, right? And you can say here, take a screenshot if it failed that I mentioned yesterday, a little bit earlier, that screenshot is then stored into Test Manager. So you can send that to the developers and say, hey, when I was running the test on syncing Salesforce and SAP, there was this problem. This is the problem, exactly the screen that you had. So there's no questions for the developer on where the problem is happening. And the logs, which will say every single click you have done, every single transaction you have created will be included on those logs. So extremely powerful to connect. Go ahead, Joel.
What about video?
It doesn't do video. Now, let's say
because I know the unattended automations you can set up to shoot a video, so it shoots like 3 minutes video prior to the
failure. But the thing is, this workflow usually wouldn't fail because you verify an expression to say, hey, I expected 10 and I received 9. Just an example. It just says, hey, from a testing perspective, it failed, but it was able to execute and verify. Now, if it failed on the execution, let's say you're expecting browser to be open and browser was not open and it couldn't open, something like that, it is a failed automation. And you can use the recorded features on Studio or Orchestrator to look at the last, it used to be 12 seconds, it's 3 minutes now, right? It got much better. But in the testing case, a failed test is a successful execution because a very common scenario is I want to give bad data to my application and I want to see that it rejects bad data. So I'll give an example. We test some stuff with fleet management and I want to give an invalid fleet code to my application and I expect it to respond to me, fleet code is invalid, please try again. That is a successful test case if the data is bad. Now, it is a failed test case if the data was good. Right? So in testing, you kind of have to switch a little bit on how you think on failure because the fail of the workflow is what we use in the RPA world. And usually you do try catches and you do, you make the bot wait a little bit more. You don't want to do any of that in a test because if the application is going too slow, you want the test case to fail. It's a performance issue. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If the application didn't respond the first time you tried, you don't want to retry. So retry scopes, try catches, lightly used. Unless I think a couple of scenarios. I think we have a scenario where we're testing something in China, and the connectivity from China sometimes can be very, very slow. So yeah, you increase a little bit of timeouts, right? You might put a retry scope there. Very, very specific scenarios. Usually in testing, you want to use as little as possible of all the controls that we do for error handling in RPA, which is funny, it's a shock. I remember when I started doing this, I was like, yeah, but if I do error handling, then I might have a problem in my application. The first time someone clicks on this thing, it's not opening, but the second time it opens and now my test passed, right? Which is not desired behavior for testing. So it's kind of funny from the RPA background that I had, you start thinking differently and say, hey, error handling, as minimal as possible. Of course, there's some situations that you need error handling, but for most of the cases, you don't.
It's
Which
a different
is
perspective.
it is
Yeah.
funny as heck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a moment, I thought you would say, no, we don't need to test because we just test the successful cases.
No, not at all. Yeah, and usually it's something that I like to do a lot. With the stuff that I do. Let's see if I can find here. I mentioned the test data piece, right? And I can usually I use Excel, right? And I'll have Excel with let's say I have to test a simple form with 3 fields. I'll have that Excel 4 fields. The last one being status, failed or successful. And when I give good data, I expect it to be successful. When I give bad data, I expect it to be failed. And if you failed on bad data, that is a successful test case, which is a way to look. But I think we have that on the presentation, right? The way this is built, of course, is an empty test case. If you create arguments on your test case, it understands. So let's say you have an argument for name, first name, last name, address, postal code, right? As you create those arguments to call that workflow, you come here and say generate autopilot, it boom, populates the test data with those fields, which usually in general, I use Excel. I don't know what do you use for test data?
And that's what I think I can vouch as a customer, Carlos. I think we had a similar old strategy, like when we were coming into testing, we were only thinking about a good case, which we know that always going to succeed, right? Like and then it defeats the purpose of running those test cases through a test automation if you're always going to come up. So we came with a similar, like you said, in Excel, like what we're telling our business folks is, before you start running a test case or give us a requirement to build it, we want to see all your possible scenarios in an Excel as to, if this is my input, it could be a positive test, it could be negative test, to make sure that we have every combination listed there, and then the expected outcome, which doesn't mean that it has to be successful. Even the failed test case also is a good test case, because you are making sure that you're capturing all type of the possibilities. I think that's one thing which before even we start building the development of a test case, the definition of a test set and the data you're going to run through the test set and the test case is very critical. And I think we have been pretty successful so far pushing business back to define and identify those data points before we do any further development. I think we are seeing a lot of progress and success keeping that approach.
Just a quick time check is 11 to 6, so we are leaning towards the end of the session. I have a quick question, if you guys don't mind, and for both of you, because you are on this, spectrum of the development cycle, the testing side, and I grew up as a developer, right? And to be honest, I ran my own tests for a long time. Like QA, like we was nowhere to be seen for many years. Do you believe that these new technologies that UiPath and other companies are bringing to the market, they're going to help to change that perspective, in a way, help the companies to invest more and get better in doing tests?
Yeah, I'll start. I believe so. So the way we're approaching that is on the code itself, right? You need unit tests. And today, if you're using Copilot, right? You build your code, you select it, say generate tests, and boom, you have the unit tests, and you test those in the pipeline, and you test those locally on the developer machine. And the unit tests is just guaranteeing that if I created a function that does action A, that you're testing the code that function, if it changes tomorrow, it should output similar results. So unit tests can be completely automated. And what UiPath is introducing now is unit tests are really the test for the developer, right? The developer is saying, hey, someone made me a request to change something on my code. If I change here, I'm not breaking there. So I changed this to fix that issue, but now I broke something else. So this goes away with unit tests, right? Now, what UiPath is doing is, from a customer's perspective, using your application once it's live, right? Really that regression test that historically has been all manual, it has becoming more and more and more automated. And where before you had to grow a team with more people, now you specialize the skill. So once you wrote that test, you wrote that test. When the application change, you might have to tweak it here or there. But my gosh, with objects describing the UI and whatnot, where you've separated the UI from the code now, and with all the advances on self-healing that UiPath has been introducing, the QA folks can do much more with the time that they have. So I think there is a definite cultural shift on bringing quality up, and that's why the QA errors exist, and that's exciting. Raul, your perspective, please.
No, it is similar. I think for us, it shifted. I think we have, like you said, the unit testing kind of a thing from our developer standpoint that all now has been inside of a test case. Like we're pushing our developers to think above what they would typically be doing at the unit testing, because that side of the unit testing is now automated through test cases. Those are like a given that yes, but then we want developers and then business folks to truly think a case where in production scenario the things could really break. If a developer is writing a code, they know where these exceptions are, where things going to fail on their code. So we have captured those scenarios already in our test cases, but then we're expecting and pushing them to think above those scenarios, and that's where the shift is coming, at least to us. And I see that that's where the trend is going, that these automations are at least helping to think beyond what your traditional code test cases has been, from both from a unit testing and from a UAT perspective.
All right, and Joy, we have until 6, right? Is that accurate?
Sorry?
We have until 6 o'clock. Have 7 more
6.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna show just one last thing that I mentioned when I was doing the intro. Let me use this tab here just because pet shop API. There you go. I mentioned that you can also test your API. So right now we showed, hey, you can do the test management piece in Studio, generate requirements and whatnot. I showed a little bit of the code piece that you can do for a web application, for a mobile application, but you can also do for an API. I just want to show that use case in 1 second here. This project, so I'm gonna, again, you use the stuff you already love from Studio, right? I can import a JSON from a Swagger interface. You can always do this to Postman if using Postman to manage your APIs. And basically those activities from my, the namespace Swagger pet store is how it would be called there. I should have given it a better name. But anyway, let's find it here. Swagger pet store. So that API that I was showing, right? So you can say, hey, I have a pet store, and if I try to find a given pet, or if I try to find inventory or something, or create an order, I want to see if that worked or not, right, from a testing perspective. So now you can get, hey, if someone is trying to, so given that I have a pet called, I don't know, I have a bird. If I call the API to add that bird, and of course you need to populate the API with what's expected, right? So you'd have to see, okay, each pass a pet ID, a name, and whatnot in this body. Then I can verify that the bird was added, or that I got a 200 results from the API. Just wanted to show real quick that it spans across everything, right? I think we had that question, can I test Salesforce? You can test the Salesforce UI, you can test the Salesforce mobile application you give to your workforce, and you can test the Salesforce APIs that you use into the integrations in a single platform, in a unified way. You can even say, hey, go on the UI, create a case, query that case to the API, and delete that case to the mobile. And you create a queue on UiPath like you do for anything else, and you just create 3 stages for that queue to do that test and guarantee that, hey, my whole Salesforce environment is healthy on those things. So I just wanted to close with a little bit of that. The test suite can test anything and can quickly span in a very consistent way that you already know if you're doing RPA and if you're doing testing, if you're coming from the QA environment. That you can achieve that high quality of automation quickly, fast, AI embedded everywhere, and really bring and elevate your QA area in your company to a different level. With that, I wanted to hand over to
Awesome.
Raul and Joel for closing thoughts. So I'll stop sharing here.
Yeah, Raul, what are your closing thoughts for the session?
I think, like I said earlier, for us as a customer, this is a game changer. We in the last 2 years, in less than 2 years since we started the journey for Test Suite, test automation, this has truly changed how we used to see the testing in the past, how we used to think about before deploying any code change to production, the traditional unit testing in a UAT, and then the process of going through series of test cases, repeated test cases every time, again and again. It has changed a lot. Of course, it took time. I think there's a change management involved to adopt the new way of doing things, and then changing the mindset of how you want to test it, how you want to really use the technology to help you run the test cases on your behalf. When you gain some confidence also that you trust and believe that the results coming out of the test cases are truly the test results you're looking. I think we have been going through a big implementation where it's a huge UAT exercise involved with the data coming in from various other systems into SAP, and we are heavily relying on UiPath test cases to at least do the front loading test cases before business folks come in, and truly bringing business only from a true advanced niche test cases where we need truly their mind and their intelligence to run their side of a test case. But all the low-hanging automation test cases, we are looking to hand over to a test bot to do it. So I think for us as a customer, it's definitely a change and it's evolving for us. I think that's where we are, and we are seeing a lot of progress and success so far.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much. I just sent a message on the chat, and I want to give the opportunity if there's any questions for the folks in the call. Okay, I don't think so. So guys, thank you very much. I enjoyed this this session very much. To be honest, I am not a tester. I haven't I do support because I am from the platform side, so I have to support Test Manager. I know little to nothing about the actual usage of it, and this session was really great for me personally because I was able to learn new things today. You know, and that's the idea, the original idea of this session. So thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you very much, Raul. Diana, thank you as well. And I think with that we can close the session, wrap it up, and see you next time.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great session.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.